Welcome to the Modern Hippie Podcast, where we'll be exploring all of my favorite boundary-pushing people and topics surrounding consciousness, psychedelics, mental performance, functional medicine, living in alignment, and so much more. I'm your host, Barrett Perlman, a former pro wakeboarder turned body worker, energy healer, and well, a modern hippie. And I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back to the Modern Hippie Podcast. I am joined today by Ricky Goodall, who is a Canadian mixed martial artist with 21 fights across 4 different weight categories, and now he is a mixed magical artist, which is just the most phenomenal title I could think of. I really vibe with that. Thank you so much for joining me today, Ricky.
Yeah, thanks for having me here.
So the first thing I have to ask is, what does being a mixed magical artist mean to you?
Yeah, thank you. I remember when I was 7 years old, I was with a friend of mine in like this little wooden fort that my dad had built for my brother and I. And we were in there praying for the powers of Bruce Lee to be as powerful as Bruce Lee someday so that I could be a martial artist and make money and have that kind of lifestyle. And Bruce Lee was the first mixed martial artist that I had ever looked up to, maybe that many people in the world had ever looked up to. And his whole thing was to never stay committed to one style, but to remain open to many different styles and to take what works for the individual person and their own needs and desires. And so when I retired from mixed magical arts or mixed martial arts, mixed magical arts seemed to be the next thing. I mean, martial arts are very magical and esoteric at their roots, I believe. And I went from using martial arts to kind of hurt others or to dominate and to be aggressive and to feed something else, to using the same level of discipline and focus to heal myself and to create space for others to heal too. So there's not one particular spiritual system or philosophy that I resonate with. There are some I resonate with more than others, but really I've remained as open as possible to studying a wide variety of spiritual systems and religions and so on.
Fuck yeah, I'm totally stealing that.
Take it. Yeah.
Put that in the bio.
Yeah.
And how long ago did you begin walking this spiritual path?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, I started meditating when I was in karate as a teenager, and I guess that would probably be the beginning of like walking a path of respect and honor and humility. And then when I became a mixed martial arts fighter, I threw that all in the garbage and was just like, eventually it became ego and money and reputation and the highlight reel on social media and all of that. And then so in 2012, I had a really bad knockout in my 16th fight. And I'd lost consciousness for like an hour, even though I got up and did interviews and had conversations. I don't remember any of it. Wow. So I had this identity crisis during that time. And I lost my relationship. My business was going under. My career seemed to be going under. And it sent me back to the movie The Secret, which had actually started it all for me in 2006 before my first MMA fight. I kind of used the law of attraction to manifest my first MMA fight. And so I went back to that, and that sort of sent me down this rabbit hole of learning the deeper roots of the law of attraction and getting into alchemy and Hermetics and Kabbalah and studying different types of ceremonial magic. And then eventually in 2015, I was initiated into ceremonial high magic. And that's when things kind of took a whole other turn.
Wow. Okay, there's so much to unpack here. So take me back first to, you started with karate. And then what martial art did you get into, and at what point did you decide you wanted to go pro?
So, I started with karate, and I loved karate. I thought that I was going to become a karate black belt. I still may someday. I really love it as an art. But then I discovered kickboxing at 15 and realized that kickboxing was significantly more practical, especially in the neighborhoods that I was living in. And karate was really great for discipline and great for self-respect. But when it comes to just getting the job done, kickboxing seemed to be a lot more effective.
Yes.
And then by the time I was 19, 20, I started training some judo, and then jiu-jitsu arrived to the area that I was living in. And then by 23, I was maybe a few months before, I was homeless and jobless, sleeping on a friend's couch. That's when he got me to watch the movie The Secret. Then mixed martial arts became legal in the province in Canada that I was living in. And I went to the very first event, and I was in the nosebleed section. And I printed one of the pictures of the main fighters off, and I put my face over top of his body and put it on my vision board and looked at it every day. And within months, I had my first fight and I won by 1 point. And so that was how it all started. I was overweight. I was like 240 pounds when I started the weight cut for that fight. I had 5 weeks notice. The guy that I was fighting was much bigger, but I just used that visualization and focus and yeah, that's how it all started.
Wow, I love that visualization technique too. I also have a mentor named Jesse Elder, and he used to run a karate school, I think, and their motto was everyone's a black belt. And so when you enrolled in the school, they would give you a black belt and they would put it on the wall with your name on it so that you could see it every day and think about where it was that you were headed to, and that you could still like embody the practices of being that black belt until you became one. And so I love how you took your face and put it on the body and just got that chance to like own it, to feel it through all of your being. Wow.
Yeah, I appreciate you for that story too. My karate teacher didn't do that, but I can imagine how powerful that would be, just having that reminder. It's like, this is where you're going. Vision of the future self.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's got me thinking, what could I be putting on my wall, right? And like, where am I going?
Yeah.
I have a loose idea, but interesting. I used to do Muay Thai as well. And I agree with you completely. It's so much more practical than karate, really. Like if you get in a street fight, you could use it.
Yeah. It's like you're just practicing real life techniques every single class versus, sometimes once in a while or whatever. And yeah, I've trained at Tulum Muay Thai. There's a club here in Tulum, and I've only trained there a handful of times, but I think they're one of the best clubs in the world. They have UFC fighters and Muay Thai champions from all over the world going there and training. And it's just like their fight classes are like so intense, so profoundly powerful. And it's like, these guys are doing this every day. They're training every day. So Muay Thai is it's so simple, it's so simple. There's not a lot to it, but you can make it so complex at higher and higher levels. And for real life situations, it's just really profoundly powerful.
Yeah. Don't tell anyone who may try and attack me, but my go-to move is like an elbow to the face, just because like no one's going to be expecting that. It's going to hurt like a motherfucker.
Yeah, totally.
What took you down to Tulum?
I came here for 2 weeks in September of 2021, which is like so many people's stories. And have you been to Tulum yourself?
I have twice. Yeah.
Yeah. So you get it, I'm sure. I came for like 10 days and I was here with an ex. And as soon as I got here, I was like, this is what I've been looking for my whole life. It's like, I don't drink, I don't party. So I know that kind of side of things exists. And there was a time in my life where I would have loved that too. But the community that's here and the consciousness and just the freedom to express and there's nothing too weird here. So it's like, I've met so many people that come here and they're just like, wow, the level of authenticity that's possible here is like nowhere else I've ever been. I hear that Bali's got a similar community and Lake Atitlan in Guatemala, but I haven't been there yet. Yes. So I fell in love with the place and I've been here since a year and 9 months now.
Oh, you just named my primary spot, which is actually Lake Atitlan in Guatemala. I go there every year for a couple weeks at a time and love that spot. But I love that how you describe that too, and just the depth of the authenticity that's there, and that concept that like the deeper we own ourselves, the more it allows everyone else around us to deeply own themselves. And then there can be this radical acceptance for people as they desire to be. And granted, that's, meaning that you're striving to be a good person and you're working on yourself and you're evolving, but we can accept each other for all of our flaws. And Tulum is a great shining example of that. And so I'm curious, what was the first sort of magical thing that you got into to discovering your path with as a higher consciousness, as a part of source?
Yeah, like I said, when I was initiated, so I was initiated into the ceremonial high magic in 2015, and that year I had both a shaman and a ceremonial magician just kind of pop into my life, and they took me on my first plant medicine journeys. And first it was with DMT, with the shaman, and a form of Brazilian mimosa bark DMT, and the ceremonial magician, it was psilocybin mushrooms. And I had taken mushrooms and DMT before on my own, but having a guide and having a intention and connecting with the medicine as an archetype and having prayers and having clear verbal intentions created an experience for me that I had never even known was possible. So that my first real spiritual experiences came from, I mean, the real ones came from rock bottom when I was like on my hands and knees begging for something to help me at certain points in my life. And then somehow things would change, but then plant medicines took it to the next level. And then when I started discovering things like breath work, and I'd been able to reach transcendental states of consciousness with just breath or fasting or different types of cleansing or meditation retreats, I think that there's so many different paths. And for my history with violence and my childhood and the highly stimulating past that I had, plant medicines worked really well because they gave me this other peak experience that I could compare to stepping in a cage or using cocaine or these other things I'd done in my past that gave me a thrill. They sort of gave me a similar thrill, but with an expansion of consciousness and healing and other aspects that I didn't get from that other life and that other world. So really, I was chasing peak experiences, and I just happened to fall into spirituality as a peak experience that I could discover and explore.
That's a beautiful parallel between the two. I don't know if you know this about me. I was a professional wakeboarder. And so the whole action sports industry as well, like I love um, those peak experiences. And they've made me now a really resilient, heroic dose taker of plant medicines and DMT. And so going into those alternate dimensions and even coming out of the most challenging of ceremonies, usually with a ability to laugh about it. But that's very interesting how you connect those two, and I think there's a lot of people in similar areas that could use that help, and the beauty of it being something that's actually for your benefit, for your growth, for your evolution, as opposed to something for your detriment. Were you ever a heavy drinker or any of that?
I mean, it's like I wouldn't have ever identified as an alcoholic, but like between fights, it would go from strict, rigid training, strict dieting, strict exercise, no alcohol, not even like mayonnaise or, whatever, just like very strict, to like binging, like just like drinking alcohol, maybe 2 or 3 days of cocaine and alcohol, not sleeping, ecstasy and working. And I was a bouncer while I was a fighter. So I was also drinking on the job. And so I had this like binge and purge lifestyle for 6 years of my career, just like one extreme to the other and back and forth and back and forth. And then maybe I have a week off and then I'm back in training again. So it would be like riding these different peak experiences. And so cocaine was like a psychoactive drug in a way that some other psychedelics seem to be sometimes. It just always led to negative karma for me, always like disasters and ruined relationships and embarrassment and humiliation. And so it's like it's been around the time I got initiated into high magic is when I stopped drinking alcohol and stopped using drugs, and they were very much like I learned a new peak experience that was more aligned for me and more authentic to me, and it didn't lead to this vicious hangover or shame for days afterwards, or these experiences of just feeling like I'm less of a person. Like again, it's like a peak experience could be when I'm really, really, really depressed and I pray and I feel better. I mean, that's a peak experience too. It's just I prefer to not hit those rock bottoms in order to have the bounce back, which I seem to have gotten almost addicted to in my life, like addicted to the suffering and then the rebound from the suffering. So once I discovered it's more of a spiritual path, I realized I don't need to have that rock bottom in order to have the transformation.
Yeah, that's a great analysis of I think what so many people go. I mean, your story completely resonates with me as well, where it was like, I'm great, I'm high on life, and then the next thing you know, it's like, Jesus, why do I have to be on this planet? Why do I have to suffer through this and go through this? And for me, plant medicines have really stabilized those ups and those downs and given me tools to navigate them better. What was describe to me in a little more detail, like the big experience that took you to plant medicine.
It was suffering. It was just suffering. It was like going through repetitive relationship cycles, dating the same types of relationships, showing up in the same way, sabotaging myself in the same way, sabotaging myself financially or in my relationships, The big thing is when I started recognizing that I almost had no control over my triggered emotions,
Mm.
but that some people claim that there's a way to have control over them. Once I realized that, I'm like, all right, then I'm responsible for this. There must be a way out. I'm getting triggered and sabotaging myself. And then these other leaders and healers are saying that they can heal those parts of themselves. So that's where I need to focus. So it started with personal development and behavioral psychology and self-help and quantum science. I started really in the logical part of my brain of trying to fix what was wrong with me. And then as I got deeper, I discovered the emotional side of it and the emotional work that needed to be done and the resolution of emotions that was necessary. And so it was like, at first it was a peak experience, and then it became like this is the only way I can experience the life that I really want. Is if I start reprogramming and retraining my nervous system and start correcting the programming that I seem to have very little control over from my past.
Right. Yeah, I hope more people can follow a similar suit in identifying that if some people have figured out how to be in control of those triggers, that maybe they too could figure out how to be in control of their triggers. What were like three of the best things that helped you start to regulate your nervous system and feel that control?
I think like the biggest thing is when I discovered that all of the past experiences I've had, all of the traumas, all of these so-called stimulating events, they carry with them this residue and this dissonance that can lead to all sorts of behavior I don't want to participate in. And when I heal them, when I resolve those traumas, when I face the pain that I'm still carrying from them, when I express it, then it's replaced with something else. And sometimes it's replaced with courage, or it's replaced with self-love and self-worth, or replaced with new gifts and talents I didn't know that I had. So once I'm like, oh, this is kind of like a video game. So if I could just like remove all the viruses in my bio supercomputer and replace them with new programming, then I can level up, and there's no limit to how far I can level up. So once I kind of realized that, I was like, okay. And then when I realized plant medicines like ayahuasca can be like rapid, when I combine like really strong intentions and a strong dieta and a strong preparation process and respect and being very clear about what I want, I can go in there and have a profound experience and walk out a completely different person. I can purge that programming, that junk that's left over, and then it's just not there anymore. I'm not the same person anymore. So that was a big part of it too. And then recognizing like how Joe Dispenza has been able to just use quantum science to shift his body and to walk again. And Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile when everyone told him that he might die or his heart would collapse. And I learned that I can literally shift dimensions. I can shift to a completely different reality by changing the programming. So it's like nothing is permanent. This world, this universe that I see around me, it's like it's not permanent, and I can influence it by changing what's happening inside of myself. So when I learned that magic is really the art of changing the subconscious mind, and plant medicines is really the art of like transforming the nervous system and connecting me to a higher power, then I can sort of combine these things to just rapidly move through the process of correction and becoming the person that I really feel like I am inside.
Yes. I love how you just combine those things in a beautiful way that I don't think any of my guests have really explicitly said before. And I'm with you. I think that our emotions are a time portal for us as well. And by thinking up emotions of the past, it teleports us to a time in the past because our body doesn't know the difference. It's like the one physical thing that we have in this realm that time is not actually real is our ability through emotions to time port. And by thinking of those future emotions and living in that future, you can also start to shift yourself into that future that you desire, essentially picking your path, picking the dimension, picking the timeline that you want to go on. And that's a fantastic way that you describe to do that. Um, I love Dispenza's work as well. I feel like what he does is kind of quantum manifestation, also by teaching people how to envision what they want and really calm themselves down and get that brain heart coherence to again attach that elevated emotion and like teleport, time port to that place where that's true. What plant medicine is your primary go-to?
I mean, it's like it depends on my intention. Like if I need
Mm,
surgery, it's ayahuasca,
yeah.
unquestionably. If I want to go crazy for like 2 months, it might be Bufo, although I don't think I'll ever do it again. a super intense experience with Bufo. And I don't think I'll use that again. San Pedro is like, if I want to really connect with nature and I want to have a deep experience with nature, I might use San Pedro. If I'm just like, I need a tune up, I need a reset, I need to connect with something, or I need to release something, then psilocybin is usually the one I'll go to most readily. And then cannabis, if it's used for music, or if it's used for creativity, or if it's used for some kind of event like that, some kind of ceremonial experience. But really, I think in terms of how much I've used them and how much work I've done with them, I would say psilocybin mushrooms have been the most effective, especially with cacao. I combine them with cacao when I have them, because I've just had such profound communication with mushrooms. And yeah, have you combined the two, mushrooms and cacao, before?
I make a microdose pill, and there's cacao and psilocybin in them, which was more my manufacturer's choice on that ingredient than my own. But I would be interested in combining them on a grander scale. What is that
Right.
like?
Well, I learned that it's an Aztec tradition apparently,
Oh,
and the Aztecs are pre-Mayan people. The Mexica, I guess, is what they're originally called. But apparently, it's like 2 to 3 ounces of cacao, and with like 3 grams of mushrooms. So it's like it's a pretty thick cacao drink by itself, and then it's the mushroom. I usually have the mushroom tea by itself. And the idea apparently is that they kind of work synergistically, sort of like ayahuasca and chacruna. They sort of work together, and the neurotransmitters and the cacao open the heart, and then the mushrooms open the consciousness, and there creates this coherence between the two. And I've had profound experiences with just mushrooms by themselves, but with cacao, it's different. It seems to take it to a different level of like bliss and relaxation, and it's just a nice experience. I really like it.
yeah, I'm a big fan of combining. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and interesting. Is that typically a ceremonial dosage of cacao, 2 or 3 ounces?
When I host ceremony, yeah, it's usually what I like to use, just because it's a pretty big dose of cacao, even, especially depending on the cacao that you're going to use. Having like
Yeah.
sometimes I'll have it with like a little cacao bar, but I'm usually fasting and that's all I'm having. It's like so bitter and dark, but it's a medicine, so I treat it
Yes, it
as
is a
such.
medicine. I put like a heaping teaspoon of cacao in my tea every day in the morning. And so I get that nice boost of it. And then, like, I'm microdosing right now. So I've got a little bit of the cacao, a little bit of the psilocybin, just as a pick me up for the
Yeah,
latter half of the day.
yeah.
I would love to know more about your Bufo and why that was so delicate for you that you're not quite sure you're ready to go back ever.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say Alan Watts once said, "When you get the message, hang up the phone."
Mm,
And I used DMT from mimosa bark, which is a different. It's just regular DMT. Bufo is 5-MeO DMT. So the regular DMT I'd used at least 100 times between 2015 and 2019. The last time I used it in 2019, I had a clear. Actually, two things happened. The first thing that happened was I was in this ceremony. I was by myself using DMT, which I do not recommend, even though many people have done it. I don't recommend it. And this is why. Because in the ceremony, I'd done 3 journeys, and the first 2 were pure bliss, pure love. I had lots of experiences I could talk about another time. But then in the third one, as I'm preparing the medicine, this voice says, "Do you really think you should be taking DMT by yourself? Don't you realize that this is sort of like an ayahuasca ceremony, but you're doing it by yourself? Do you think this is a good idea?" And I was just like, whatever, and poured the DMT in the pipe, and then I smoke it, and the next thing I know, my entire room turns into like hell. It's like a realm. It's like a confusing, chaotic realm of hell, and everything's black and white. It's still sort of my room, but it's this like otherworldly dimension. I can hear all these demonic voices saying, "Oh, you should have never used DMT. You should have never kept going." And I was so scared. I got up and I left my room, and I went out into my living room. My whole room looks like I'm in hell, like fire and dark imagery. And I'm like, "Oh my God, what is happening right now?" So I close my eyes and I'm praying, and I'm like, "Please, please, I just want to go home." And this voice says, "Slow down, breathe, create what you want." And I realized that this is the formula for life.
mm,
Slow down, breathe, create what you want. And so
mm.
I slowed my breathing. I started breathing really deeply. I started imagining the world that I wanted. And then my room came back. It was no longer this hellish dimension, but it was like a cartoon dimension. And so now all the demons are saying, we tricked you. Now you're going to be stuck in this cartoon dimension forever. And I'm like, no. And I'm like crying. And this is all like, I'm literally walking around my apartment, which I don't know if you've ever had DMT, but I don't think that's normal. I don't usually get up walking around. So anyway, I crawled to my bathroom, crying in the bathroom. The lights are off. I'm like, if I could just go home, I swear I'll be a better person. I won't ever use DMT in a ceremony again. And I turned the lights on and I'm back home. It's like 30 minutes later. So that was the first experience. And then another experience I had, it was terrifying. It was totally traumatizing. It was super scary.
Just to clarify, this was DMT or this was Bufo?
This is DMT.
Okay.
So the DMT basically said
experience.
It was really long. It was really long. It was I've talked to many shamans about it and they're like, I've never heard anything like that before. So it was, and to be able to walk around and it was strange. So I kind of got the message that I was done with DMT. That it's not something I'm meant to be using anymore. But I was very curious about Bufo. So when I first came to Mexico and eventually moved to Tulum, before I came to Tulum, I went to Merida to a sanctuary, a Bufo sanctuary, and it was a 3-day immersive experience. So we're at this retreat center for 3 days, and it's only 2 Bufo ceremonies, one the first night, one the second night. They knew my history with psychedelics and my history with mixed martial arts, and they apparently gave me like 2 massive doses, which I found out later on. And so the first thing that happened was right before I'm about to smoke the DMT, I say, can I share something with you, to the facilitator? He said, yeah, sure. I was like, I'm afraid that I'm never going to come back. I'm having this fear that I'm never going to come back. And he's like, don't worry, you'll come back. I'm like, oh, okay. Thank you. So I smoked the DMT and like what's the most obvious thing you could say in that moment, I suppose. But the first thing that happened is I became pure pleasure, like pure bliss beyond my wildest dreams. And I just kept screaming like, I am pleasure, I am pleasure, I am bliss. But it's like the volume got turned up so high that pleasure became chaotic and confusing and overwhelming. My nervous system couldn't handle it. My nervous system was trying to like process it, and it was just very difficult. And I thought I was gone, and I was never going to come back. And so I'm walking around in this circle that they have us in, and then eventually I kind of came to, and I was so scared. So then the next night we have the second ceremony, and in that one I smoked it, and then all of a sudden I look around, I could see everyone still, except I was in like a heavenly dimension, and it was like bliss. And I'm like, oh wow, this is what home feels like. This is what heaven feels like. And then same thing, it started getting really dark and really strange and really confusing. And I looked at the woman that ran the retreat center, and I said, am I in hell right now? She said, are you in hell? I'm like, what? Am I in hell? And she's like, well, it's your choice. And I was like, fuck. I wasn't confident in my ability in that state of consciousness to choose heaven or hell. So I was kind of like, oh man, if it's my choice, that's a lot of responsibility right now, because I don't know if I can really think positively enough to create that. And I look at my ex-girlfriend who was there, and I say, what's happening? Where am I? And she just opens her eyes and says, love is the answer. But it was so confusing because like nothing felt like it was really clear or like blessed or divine or happy or positive or anything. It was really dark. And then the owner of the retreat center, the facilitator, comes over and he looks at me and he just says, it's okay, you're home. And then the whole vision went away. And then I realized I was there with him in this place and that everything was fine. And I got on my hands and knees and started crying. It was so intense. And it's not to say that there's like, I find value in both of those experiences, but like ayahuasca has taken me places that's been pretty profoundly terrifying. And it seems like I get more from it, because after Bufo, it was like 2 months after Bufo, I was mentally unstable. Like I didn't feel like I felt like I was almost going through some kind of like mild psychosis or something. It was very intense. And I would have a lot of dreams at night that would be like Bufo flashbacks almost, where I would have these vivid, they were profound, and some of them were so beautiful, and I'm so grateful for them. So I would say that the dreams were probably the best part about it, actually, because that's where I got most of the spiritual insight and processing that I was looking for. But the actual Bufo was like, it was terrifying.
Yeah, so those are called reactivations. When you have them in your dreams, and then also if you take mushrooms right after, you'll reactivate the Bufo. So
Yeah.
Fun
Yeah.
fact and or beware.
I learned that. Yeah. And cannabis apparently too. I stopped using cannabis for 8 months after Bufo because I just was like flashback every time. It's like going right back into it.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I've had much stronger lessons on ayahuasca than Bufo. I've done Bufo 4 times, and my favorite part as well is the reactivations for like the week afterwards that I would get while I was sleeping, or I would usually take mushrooms right after so that I could sit in that space for what was way longer than a psilocybin journey and really get a chance to navigate and to learn more things. But yeah, that's a pretty powerful thing. Like my last Bufo ceremony, I ended up doing 4 different rounds what I think is a small dose, like 36 milligrams. Um, but by the end, it got really, really dark, and I was like dying over and over. I thought my face was swelling, and things were um, not feeling okay for me. And I would look to my facilitator and I'd be like, is my face swollen? And he'd be like looking real close. I was like, no, it would be like elephant size. Like, is it swollen? He'd be like, no, no, you're okay. I'm like, okay, okay. As long as you say I'm okay, I'm not going to freak out. But yeah, those lessons are interesting to digest on
Yeah.
fire. Yeah.
You said 35 milligrams. Is that what you said?
Yeah, my first time I did 68 milligrams, my second, and then 46 right after. And then my second time I did 72, I think, and then a smaller dose. But this last time we did 36 4 times in a row.
Okay.
What was
Yeah.
your
Apparently
massive dose?
they were 135 milligrams each. Yeah. So
No
it was
way.
like
So,
so far beyond anything that I've ever even heard of before. So it's like, I mean,
wow.
I imagine that I created it in my reality for some reason. There was some value in it. And it did lead to some big shifts and changes, including moving to Tulum, which was a
Mm.
big change in my life at that time. I was living in Costa Rica, but yeah, it's like, I think I'm good. Like I don't have any desire. I just got back from Peru literally a week ago. So I
Mm.
just went for ayahuasca, and that was my first time at the retreat center I go to in 5 years. So
Wow.
lots of what I needed there. I just find it Bufo. I heard like the harvesting method of Bufo is that basically the frogs need to be scared to secrete the venom or whatever to
Mm.
release the venom. So it's like it's based in fear. I don't know if there's any correlation to that and how the medicine shows up, but ayahuasca just seems to be prepared in a different way, and I think the preparation is really important too, or make it
Yeah.
important at least.
Where do you go in Peru?
There's a retreat center called Etnica's in Pisac, and I went there twice in 2016 and then once in 2018. And I just went there last 2 weeks ago. The retreat center is now expanded. It's almost 10 times the size of the one that I went to
Wow.
5 years ago. Yeah, there, and it's surrounded by mountains, like literally right in a valley with mountains all
Mm.
around. Like literally, sometimes I would just be standing there and be like, "Whoa!" Like there's just there's these massive mountains, and they're right there, like right inside of this retreat center that we're at. So yeah, it's a
Cool.
magical place. They own a dog shelter and they're connected with a kindergarten and an orphanage. So we do all sorts of volunteering. Well, like the day after ayahuasca, like volunteering with kids, Peruvian kids. It's just like, oh, heart opening, and yeah, it's really
Yeah.
powerful. Yeah.
Oh, it's a good idea. Where I go is just outside of Iquitos in the Amazon, and I'm actually headed back there in just under 3 weeks, I think, and we'll be doing 2 weeks of ayahuasca. And but yeah, they don't. There's like a pool, and everyone has pretty nice rooms, and nice enough that there's like not mosquitoes, and there's running water, and there's like electricity half of the day. It's like nice by
Yeah,
Peru standards.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, Peru's a whole other world. I can imagine the jungles. I haven't been there. I imagine the jungles a whole other level of healing and challenges and all that.
It's delightful. This place in particular is called the Heliconia Lodge, and they've built the whole place up on stilts. And so you actually get to walk everywhere so that when it rains, you don't have to deal with the mud. But also, I think the introduction to their Amazon walk is kind of on stilts as well. I actually love to get done with ceremony and then head into the Amazon. And I insist on not wearing shoes the whole time I'm there. So I'll walk around the barefoot in the Amazon and like really ground in that space, which is just, there's a part of my soul that just resonates so deeply with the lungs of the earth, that Amazon space. So I'm excited
Yeah,
to go back.
yeah. Yeah, I could visualize you walking around on your bare feet. I can only imagine. I mean, when I lived in Nosara, Costa Rica before Tulum,
Mhm.
and it was just bare feet all the time and through the
Yeah.
jungle, and it's like, but the Amazon, I can't imagine how it would be even that and more.
Yeah, it's pretty funny because most everyone is like scared who shows up. And I'm like walking around barefoot. They're like, "How are you? You're gonna go barefoot through the Amazon?" They finally started putting signs up saying like, "Please wear shoes when you walk through the Amazon." And I'm like, whatever. But I'm also a strong believer that I have so much ayahuasca coursing through my veins at that point that like I am one with nature, and so
Yes, I agree. Yeah,
good
yeah.
things happen. I
Mm-hmm.
have an experience I want to share with you. I recently did Pharmahuasca, which
Mm,
is taking of an MAOI followed by 45 minutes later orally ingesting DMT.
mm,
And that turned into like a 4 hour experience for me.
mm,
And it started, I took like 300 milligrams of DMT, which is what they say should be a breakthrough dose. And it was massively intense and was super strong for like 45 minutes and then completely wore off. And I thought I was done. And then like an hour and a half later, it ramped back up. Like I went from no visuals, nothing to like, why is my skin crawling again? Why? And I closed my eyes. I was like, I'm starting to see things again. And it
mm,
completely ramped back up again into like an ayahuasca experience, which is just, like ever so slightly different from DMT. It's got that stronger intelligence to it. And then it ultimately took me, I started like spontaneously vomiting all over myself in the bathroom and dying over and over again. And
mm,
it felt then much more like a natural medicine experience of like sitting with source and oneness. And in my visions, my Bufo facilitator was there, who's this kind, strong man with these deep, intense eyes. Just makes you feel so protected when you're with him.
mm,
And his energy came and was kind of like walking with me, being like, it's okay. It's all a part of the process. And I was like, are you sure? I'm literally vomiting up my nose right now and into my eyes, down my hair. Like I'm dying and dying and dying and dying and dying to the point where I started to just wish I would die. And that was a real big first for me in the medicine.
mm,
I'm generally super resilient, and it was the most challenging ceremony I've had to date. And I've had some challenging ones before, but it took me a while to like integrate that. A while is like a week for me. And the lessons for me that came out of that were just all of these deep layers of myself that had to die off. And in that medicine, like really die off to make way for what I was stepping into. And so, what were some of your challenging revelations?
mm. I appreciate you for sharing that. It sounds really scary. I had an image of you, and you're saying you're vomiting. It's like that. I've had a feeling in ceremonies where I'm just like, am I fucking dying right now? Like, what the fuck is going on? What the
Yeah.
fuck is happening right now? Am I
Yeah.
gone? Like, is it my mind never coming back? In
And of all things,
2016,
my boyfriend was actually trip sitting for me, but she was like, "Do you want me to
mm,
be here?" And I was like, "I'm so seasoned. I don't need that. Like it'll be fine. It's just DMT, you know." But I'm really glad he was, because I eventually had to like crawl out of the bathroom and be like, "I need your help. Like I need to get
mm,
in the shower. I can't turn the shower on. I can't stand up. I can't." And he's like, "I was wrecked." So
mm.
yeah, strongly
Yeah, well,
advise.
yeah. Just be careful, huh? Well, in 2016, I had a massive dose of ayahuasca. I'd been friends with the owners of the retreat center, and the son of one of the owners. I told him that I wanted to have enough ayahuasca so I never have to drink ayahuasca ever again. So I didn't know what I was getting into. So usually, like everyone else had about this much, and my cup was like it was filled right to the top. And I thought they were joking at first, like just to see if I was going to drink it. But I'm like, all right, well, I'll show them that I'll drink it. And I drank it, and it was like, I mean, my second ayahuasca ceremony was intense, but this one was a whole other level. Like the
Mm,
first thing that happened is I was gone. I was in nothingness. I had no memory. I had no personality. I didn't know I was in Peru, and I was terrified. I thought I'd died and gone to hell. I was so scared. And I was crying out and I was saying, "What is this? What is this? Where am I? Please." There's no answer. And then finally, I'm saying, "What is this?" And this voice says, "What's wrong?" And it's Mother Ayahuasca. She's like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "What is this? Where am I?" She says, "What's wrong? I thought you wanted to know what it's like to be the creator." She said, I thought you wanted to know what it's like to be God. So don't you recognize at this level of your consciousness, you're all there is. There's nothing else for you to experience here. She said, this life you've created as Ricky Goodall is the vacation you've given yourself to get away from being all there ever was, all there ever is, and all there ever will be. So don't you recognize that ancient people never bow down out of fear of their creator? They bow down out of compassion. Thank you for this gift of separation, this gift of relationship, this gift of illusion, because without it, you're alone forever. And so many other things had happened. She showed me the tetragrammaton, the six-pointed star. This is what my book is about. And all sorts of other stuff. And so that was really intense. But just last week, when I was in Peru, the first two ceremonies were fine. I was like, oh, this is great. It's nice to be back. Another ayahuasca's been really gentle to me these days. And right before this third ceremony, there was a guy in the retreat center that was getting on my nerves. And I was even journaling about how all the things I was judging him for were reflections of myself. And I know that it's just me. I know that it's just triggering parts of myself I haven't accepted. But he was getting on my nerves so much. And right before the third ceremony, I was so pissed off that I prayed, and I kind of prayed in vanity a little bit. Like I prayed with anger, like I was fucking praying. And,
wrong emotion.
Yeah, it was just like, and bringing that into the ayahuasca ceremony. So I brought that into the ceremony. I asked them to give me a double dose that I had last time. Because there were other guys that were having more than that. So I'm like, I could do double last time. It's fine. I've got lots of experience. It'll be all right. And so I drink it, and like the first thing that happens is it's just really demonic imagery, like dark, scary, rabid animals, and like this. And I'm sitting there, and I'm kind of like, no, this doesn't make sense. What the hell's happening right now? Because they've been all like my last like 6 ceremonies with like 10 ceremonies with Mother Ayahuasca have been so loving, so nice. I'm like, what's happening right now? This doesn't make sense. So I'm sort of sitting in this feeling of this really crazy demonic imagery. And again, like telling myself, like, no, this doesn't make any sense. Like, I don't understand. And so finally, Mother Ayahuasca says, see, this is all just existing in your ego right now. It's not real. You can just stop focusing on it and we'll all go away. And I stopped focusing on it and it all went away. And so then I'm like in this pure bliss, this pure presence. And I start drinking my water and I'm purging and I'm moving my body around. I'm feeling so lucid and that I'm just like, oh, I can use ayahuasca right now to just purge. I can tell her where to go and she's going to purge. And I'm moving around and I'm doing all this stuff in my seat. I run out of water and I ask the organizers to bring me some more water. So they bring me water and I drink it and it's warm water. And I didn't have warm water up to this point. I had cool water. And I'm like, what the fuck? And I start getting really dizzy. Like I'm no longer in the lucidity anymore. I'm like, the room's spinning. I'm like, oh God, they must have given me something. What the hell would they give me? This is my friend. Now I'm friends with the family who owns the retreat center. And now I'm questioning them. I'm like, what the hell? They gave me something in my drink and they didn't ask my permission. Like, what did they give me? Now the trip is, I'm spinning and everything's really intense. So I asked to go to the bathroom and I go to the bathroom and I'm like down on my knees and puking and begging for mercy. Like, Mother Ayahuasca, please have mercy, praying to God, like have mercy. Really, I'm going really deep right now and it's coming out of nowhere. So I come out of the bathroom and I talk to the organizer and I sit down beside her and she's just saying, you know, the suffering just comes from being attached to our identity. You know, and when we're attached to our identity, it's really hard to let go sometimes. And it's just, there's a lot of suffering that has to happen. And I look at the clock and it says 9 o'clock and I'm like, wait a minute. How long has that clock been 9 o'clock for? I think it's been 9 o'clock for hours. And then I'm like, how long am I going to be here for? And she's just like, as long as it takes. She doesn't know what's going on in my head, of course. So I'm like, what? Well, but how long is the trip going to last? She's like, well, it's going to last as long as it takes. I'm like, am I going to be here forever? She's like, well, not forever, just as long as you need to be here. And I'm just like having all these thoughts of like, I'm in purgatory. Like I'm never leaving this place. There's a lesson I need to learn and I'm never going to learn it. I'm just going to be stuck in this realm forever. So I'm freaky. It's sort of like the Bufo. Like it's like, and I asked Mother Ayahuasca to help me process the Bufo experience. And so I'm stuck in this realm and I'm talking to the organizer and now it's getting so intense that I can't even look at her anymore because she's moving. So, you know, DMT gets sometimes. It's like she's moving back and forth. Everything's moving. I close my eyes. It's even worse. And I'm like, I think I'm having a really bad trip right now. She's like, you're going to be okay. And I'm like, no, I think like, I don't know what's happening right now. I feel like I'm losing my mind. She's like, well, just breathe. I start breathing. She's like, I'm going to go get the nurse. She goes to get the nurse, and as I'm breathing, everything goes back to normal again. I'm like, yes, I did it. I'm okay. But then as soon as I said that, everything went back to like squirrely again. And I'm like, I'm freaking out. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I've never had a trip like this. Usually, if it's a bad trip, I'm stuck on my mattress. I'm not thinking and walking around and lucid. Like I'm in a space and I'm just going through my trip. But this is weird. Like it's like Mother Ayahuasca is taking me on some journey I couldn't understand. So I'm talking to the woman. I'm like, I need to get out of this trip. I don't know what to do. Like I feel like I'm going to go crazy. It's too much for my mind right now. Like it was like the volume was being turned up, like endlessly being turned up. She says, well, we have a needle we can give you. It's an antipsychotic shot. It will take you out of the trip. It takes about 15 minutes and it can like slowly take you down. I'm like, yeah, if anything, please just get me out of this trip. Like, get me out of this. And it's like so excruciating. So they lay me down. They give me the needle in my ass. And as soon as they give me the needle, Mother Ayahuasca shows me this symbol again and all these other symbols. And she says, see, you prayed for humility. Now I'm giving it to you. The prayers that I had before the ceremony were like, thank you for humility. Thank you for forgiving this guy that's pissing me off and getting on my nerves. Thank you for compassion. Thank you for, she said, your attachment to your identity is not causing you suffering the way you think it is. It's causing you suffering because all of the ways you're playing small and dimming your shine because you're afraid that people aren't going to like Ricky Goodall. They're not going to like you. They're going to think you're crazy. They're going to think you're weird. They're going to think you're strange. You need to be willing to just crucify that part of yourself, let it go completely, throw it to the fire, let it burn on the stake or whatever, to be who you really are. You have to let that go. It's the only way you're going to feel it. And if I and God have to humble you over and over and over again for you to learn these lessons, then we'll do that. This is the unconditional love that you've asked for. And I'm just laughing now because I'm like, I have judged the pharmaceutical industry since I started my spiritual path. Like, judge. There's no fucking place for it, even though I know there's value for emergencies and things, but it's like really judgmental. And now here I am relying on that system to save me from this system. So then after I have this needle, the trip starts wearing off and suddenly I'm like overwhelmed with rage now. Like I have so much rage. I don't know where it's coming from. I can't understand it. I go back to my room. I'm like punching pillows, screaming in my pillow, journaling, moving my body, trying to do everything, shaking, screaming. Nothing's working. So by 3:30 in the morning, I realized I'm actually having an anxiety attack. I've never had one before. And all this rage is creating this anxiety attack. So I go and I wake the doctor up. I'm like, what can I do? It's like, we can give you anti-anxiety medication. So now here's another medication.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, well, fuck, I need to say yes to this right now. So I took a clonazepam. Now, the interesting thing is my dad, who just passed away in July, he passed away of a heart attack. He took clonazepam his whole life. And I judged him for most of his life for it because I'm like, you don't need that stuff. They're not helping you. It's just, they're keeping you addicted to it, blah, blah, blah. And here I am using the same medication to get me out of this trip. And so for 2 days afterwards, I have this anxiety. I'm actually at the point where I'm scared that I'm not going to go back to normal. I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be in a permanent psychosis now because of ayahuasca. Like, I don't know what the hell's going to happen. So the day after the ayahuasca ceremony, I go to my Airbnb with my friend who's there with me. I get a good night's sleep that day, and I woke up the next day, and I've been happier than I've ever been ever since. So it's like Mother Ayahuasca seemed to take me down this like horrifying, scary, dark road of chaotic mental confusion just to show myself that I have everyone I need around me to support me. I have everything I need around me to support me, and I can get myself out of it just through my will, through my focus, through my faith, and just reminding me that even though I'm on this path, I was initiated as a shaman at this retreat center back in 2018. None of it matters. I can still get just as humbled. I can still just have to like eat shit and be humbled and be embarrassed and just remember that when it really comes down to it, I don't know anything and I'm just a servant of the universe. I'm just here to experience and to create and to enjoy and have gratitude for everything that's here.
Yes. And I really enjoy how your tale of humility and beginning to identify it even during the shittiness of your experience really has carried through as a lifelong lesson, that as a shaman, you need to have that humility, that we are not God, we are not the fixers and the saviors, we are just here to humbly help do work and help people remove their blockages and help them heal if that's what's in their path for them this lifetime. And so what advice do you have for someone who's considering ayahuasca or plant medicine and they hear these stories and they're just super unsure? What advice do you have for someone?
Yeah, it's like, it's interesting. The word shaman to me means so many things. And like there were two shamans at Etnikas when I was there, two brothers, an older brother, a younger brother. The older brother was finishing his apprenticeship with his younger brother. And they're both from the Amazon. They're both from the I forget which tribe they're from. And when they were singing the Icaros, they were singing them together. It was so profoundly powerful. It was like one guy's on one end of the room, the other guy's the other. They have very similar voices, singing very similar Icaros in harmony with one another. And it's just like, wow, so powerful. Like these guys, like their initiation process is a 4-year dieta of like no sex, no masturbation, no coffee, no chocolate, no red meat, no pork, no alcohol, no cannabis, no drugs, nothing. And for periods of time, like 30, 60, 90 days, they're doing plant dietas with specific dietas to cleanse them and prepare them. So my advice is, if you're going to work with a shaman, depending on which medicine you're going to use, find out like, what is the lineage, what is the background, what is the training, what kind of work have they done on themselves, what are they bringing to the table? Because I've done ayahuasca in other places in Etnikas, and I won't mention where, but I've done it at a retreat center, and the shamans there were younger than me, some of them. Now, these shamans at Etnikas were younger than me too, except they've been doing it for 21 years in the jungle.
Right.
You know, that they were preparing ayahuasca before they were even like 10, 12 years old. They're preparing it for the elders. And then some of these other shamans I meet, it's like they're like me, and I'm initiated as a shaman. I believe that I have lots of value to offer, and that I have lots of work that I do with people when it comes to plant medicines. But when it comes to ayahuasca, personally, I'm going to like the best of the best. Like I want to go to the people who have had a 4-year initiation, who have gone through these extraordinary processes to learn how to work with this medicine. Because as you know, ayahuasca is no fucking joke. Like it's a powerful technology. It's not like mushrooms, even though mushrooms can be intense too, or Bufo, even though Bufo is really intense. Ayahuasca is like, as you know, it's like it's working on every cell of the body. So it's like, I really want to make sure I'm in the care of people and professionals that can get me out of difficult situations, like this situation. Like I imagine that Mother Ayahuasca took me through that intentionally, and I'm really glad that I had the support and the care that I did, because without doctors and nurses and other people around, the situation can get really scary sometimes. And it's like, I asked for a really big dose, and anyone who experiences stuff like that usually asks for really big doses. The littler doses don't typically create those types of experiences from what I've seen. So if somebody who's new, it's like, make sure they're working with really highly qualified professionals. Don't get too cocky. Be respectful. Be humble with the medicine, and do the preparations, the proper preparations. I think they're maybe the most important part of it all.
Yeah. And what kind of work do you do with your clients? What can my listeners come to you for?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I mean, I just wrote a book called The Way of the Garden, A Hero's Journey from the Human to the Higher Self. And in that book, I tell the story of how throughout all of these medicine ceremonies and working with coaches and working with different shamans and healers, I've learned how to sort of perform like a spiritual surgery on my clients, where if they're struggling with repetitive patterns of suffering in their relationships, or maybe they don't trust their own inner wisdom, they don't trust their intuition, they don't trust their own guidance, maybe they struggle to really have faith that they're worthy of the life that they really desire, and to create the things they really want to create. So that's the work I do with clients, is I help them sort of realign their programming to match the life that they really want, rather than the default life that was created from their childhood or their past experiences or the guilt or the shame that they're carrying in their life. So I call it coaching sometimes. I call it ceremonial work sometimes. It shows up in different ways. But really, it's about helping them become more of their authentic self, who they really are beneath the programming and the people pleasing and the questioning their own inner guidance and questioning their intuition. Just really helping them create a strong, I once heard the word synapse, between them and their higher power, to really strengthen that synapse so that they can be more guided. Like I once heard imagine the analogy of like trying to run against a wall versus being led by the heart. It's like when I'm running against the wall, that's usually when I'm efforting and creating a lot of stress in my life and overwhelm and taking on too much. When I'm being guided, it's like it's effortless. I'm just sort of moving along with the flow. So I think that we all have a flow state. We all have a higher consciousness. Like you said, the peak experiences with wakeboarding. I mean, we all have this ability to tap into that at any given time. But for me, with all of the traumas I'd been through and the emotional experiences, I couldn't really trust the flow state. So I would constantly bring myself out of it to come back to a more familiar state of emotions, which for me was a lot of trauma and stress and overwhelm. So I kind of help my clients reprogram their nervous system so they can live in the flow state and trust the guidance that's taking them there so that they can create the life that they want. And I use the term like heaven on earth, like they create their own heaven on earth, whatever that means to them.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I love we have the authenticity thing in common, and that's just so important and so valuable. And I greatly salute you and respect you and have gratitude for the work that you're doing. Thank you so much for sharing your gifts with the world. And your book was lovely. I also love how you put the 6-pointed star on like every single page, just to really drive that energy frequency home for people. And how can my listeners keep up with you? Where do you like to hang out on social media?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Instagram and TikTok recently. I am the higher self are my handles. And I'm running a live event in June a couple of times called the Yeshua Code Revealed. So I'm revealing this ancient geometrical, magical, mystical system that I discovered when studying esoteric systems while working with all of these mentors I worked with. And so that's launching on June 14th at 3 p.m. Cancun time. So they can visit that rickygoodall.com/the code. But finding me on social media is probably best. It's the best place, Instagram or TikTok, and then Facebook, just Ricky Goodall.
Awesome. Well, we will have that all linked up in the show notes. And your event sounds really exciting. I may have to jump in on that and learn what it is that you've learned from all of these lessons. So, yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Barrett. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and review this podcast wherever you're listening. I'm so grateful to have you on this journey with me. Until next time.